All right, so get this. We're going deep into sex magnetism.
Yeah.
Yeah, you heard that right. And honestly, these hypnosis tracks you sent over by Dr. Laura Giorgio, I gotta say, they're pretty wild.
Oh, wow. Hypnosis for that. Well, when it's done ethically, it can really tap into the subconscious. And
Hmm.
it sounds like Dr. DiGiorgio is using it to help people, I guess, boost how attractive they seem.
Exactly. And it makes you think, right? Like, what made you want to dive into this? Are you trying to be more confident? Or maybe you're just curious about, like, the whole psychology of attraction. Whatever it is, we're about to unpack some seriously interesting techniques. So
Mhm.
let's break it down track by track. We'll pull out the main methods Dr. DiGiorgio uses to off that you can give us the why behind them, the science, the psychology, the whole shebang.
Sounds good to me. Let's start with, what's it called? Develop a sexually magnetic personality.
Okay, so this one, it starts off pretty classic, typical hypnosis stuff, focusing on a spot, deep breaths, relaxing your muscles, all that. But then, and this is where it gets interesting, she tells you to picture yourself as magnetic, almost like you're taking on the traits of someone you find totally irresistible.
Ah, I see. So by using visualization, she's basically helping people create this mental image, this blueprint of the kind of magnetism they want to project.
Yeah, and she doesn't hold back on their affirmations either. She's like, I'm irresistibly sexually magnetic, or whomever I desire desires me now. She really goes all in. Do you think there's any actual power in repeating stuff like that?
Well, there's a surprising amount of research on affirmations, actually. It's not just some, positive thinking mumbo jumbo. Repeating these phrases,
Hmm.
it can actually start to rewire those neural pathways in your brain, kind of like, creating a groove on a record.
Hmm.
The more you play it, the deeper that groove gets.
Wow, so it's not magic, it's neuroscience. That's pretty cool. And then get this. At the end of the track, she tells you to take that feeling of magnetism out into the real world, and see how people react. It's like a real life experiment in attraction.
That's a really interesting approach. All right, let's move on to the next track. Generate sexually magnetic energy. This one, well, it gets a bit more visual, let's say.
Oh, yeah. She has you picture yourself standing in a sphere of, and I quote, red hot sexual energy, absorbing it through every single pore.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's quite the image.
It is, it is. But as out there as it sounds, it could be tapping into this deeper psychological idea
Yeah.
that our thoughts and emotions,
Mm.
they can actually have a physical impact on our bodies.
Okay, I see what you mean. Like, think about blushing. When we feel embarrassed, our cheeks flush, right? It's like a physical sign of what's going on emotionally.
Right, exactly. So by really vividly imagining this red hot energy, listeners might actually trigger some sort of physical response in themselves.
Interesting. So are you saying just by picturing it, our bodies might actually react?
It's possible, yeah.
Uh,
The connection between mind and body is super complex, and honestly, we don't fully understand it. But there is some evidence that suggests our thoughts and beliefs, they can influence all sorts of things, everything from your heart rate to your immune system.
Okay, so it's not totally crazy to think that imagining this energy could have a real effect. But then she takes it even further. She tells you to direct that energy towards someone you're attracted to, like a laser beam almost, to spark their own sexual response. Do you think that's even possible?
Well, let's be real, we can't literally shoot energy beams out of our eyes, but the whole concept of like focusing your intention on someone, that's definitely intriguing.
Okay, so maybe it's not about actual energy beams, but more about the power of like what you believe and expect. So if you believe you're projecting this magnetic energy and you act like it could actually change how the other person sees you.
Exactly. Our beliefs shape how we act, and how we act shapes what actually happens. It's this fascinating loop. And get this, Dr. DiGiorgio even suggests using this technique in a business meeting, to get someone to agree with you.
Now that's a bold claim. Do you think there's anything to that, or is that getting into like ethically questionable territory?
It's definitely pushing the boundaries, for
Okay.
sure. Let's dig into that a bit more as we move on to the next track. Project Sexually Attractive Energy. This one's all about taking that magnetism and actively pushing it outward.
Oh, yeah. And she has this whole thing about classes of people. The ones who project unconsciously, the ones who do it on purpose to impress people, and then the, like, masters who can use it to directly influence others.
Interesting. It sounds like she's building this like hierarchy of mastery
Mm-hmm.
with the ultimate goal being, conscious and deliberate projection. It's like comparing someone who stumbles upon some hidden talent to someone who like hones that talent for years.
And her techniques, they get pretty specific. Projecting through your eyes, through your hands. She even talks about charging a whole room with sexual energy. There's this gesture of power, too. You create this physical thing, an anchor, to trigger that magnetic state whenever you want. Have you come across that kind of thing in your work?
Yeah, anchoring techniques are actually pretty common in different fields, from performance coaching to therapy even. The idea is to link a physical gesture or a mental image to a state you want to be in. That way, you can access it easier in the future, like a mental shortcut to feeling confident or charismatic, for example.
So you're basically training yourself to turn on the charm. But then it gets even wilder. She has this exercise where you imagine sending a direct flash of energy to someone, and you say things like, "You find me irresistibly sexually attractive," in your mind. She even gets into specifics about targeting their eyes, their third eye, and the nape of their neck, the jade pillow, she calls it. It's all getting very
Yeah.
uh, esoteric.
It is. It is. And while this whole idea of like energetic influence is definitely intriguing, it's important to approach these claims with a healthy dose of skepticism. I mean, there's no scientific proof that we can actually transmit energy like that.
Okay, so we can't literally send energy beams. But what if, even if we can't actually send energy, just by focusing on someone really intently and picturing what we want, maybe that could have some kind of subtle effect.
Exactly. It's like the difference between just throwing darts at a board randomly and carefully aiming for the bullseye. The more focused your intention, the more likely you are to hit your target, even if how it actually works is way more complex than you initially thought.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so next up is the sexual direct flash technique. And yeah, it's pretty intense. Are you ready for this?
Lay it on me.
All right, so this one involves creating a sexual thought form. You generate energy between your hands, picture it as a ball, charge it with your breath. You even add specific images and commands before sending it to the person you're into.
Wow. That sounds like a recipe for some kind of magic love potion.
Yeah.
But jokes aside, there's something interesting going on here with the whole like creative visualization thing.
Yeah, like instead of thinking of it as literally sending some thought bomb, maybe it's more about what's happening internally, clarifying what you want and what your intentions are.
Exactly. It's about like programming your subconscious to act in a way that lines up with those desires.
And she does have this one ethical thing she mentions here. She advises against using this technique on people who are already in relationships.
Right, because that would definitely cross a line.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a good reminder that respecting boundaries and like people's right to make their own choices is super important.
Okay, let's switch gears a bit and talk about sexual body language and sexual rapport. This one's all about nonverbal communication. We're talking bedroom eyes, the power of a genuine smile, even those subtle body language cues that are different for men and women.
Now, this is where things get really interesting. From a psychology standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
nonverbal communication is incredibly powerful.
Mm-hmm.
It can reveal hidden emotions, intentions, even personality traits. Think about how you can often tell if someone's lying just by watching how they move.
Yeah, it's like our bodies are always giving off signals, whether we realize it or not. And Dr. Giorgio brings up this technique called pacing and leading. Basically, you subtly mirror someone's body language to build a connection, and then you gradually shift yours to influence theirs. She even told the story about people almost falling off benches because of this.
Ugh.
Yeah, wild, right?
That's a great example of how powerful mirroring can be. When we mirror someone, it creates this unconscious sense of connection and trust. Think about how you naturally gravitate towards people who just seem to get you. They often mirror your movements and expressions without even realizing it.
Right, like they're speaking our body language. And once you've built that connection, you can start to subtly lead them into a different emotional state or behavior pattern. It's amazing how much influence those tiny cues can have.
It is. And this principle goes way beyond just trying to attract someone.
Yeah.
Think about effective leaders or really good negotiators. They often use mirroring and pacing to build rapport and create that sense of collaboration.
That's a great point. So these techniques, even though they're presented in this context of sexual attraction, they can actually be applied to all sorts of social interactions, right? It's about understanding how humans connect and using that ethically to get a certain outcome.
Precisely. And that brings us back to the importance of intention, which is something Dr. Giorgio talks about a lot throughout her tracks. It's not just about blindly following these techniques. It's about understanding the principles behind them and applying them consciously and responsibly.
Right. It's about being aware of how our actions affect others and using our influence in a way that matches up with our own values. And that's especially important when we're talking about things that work on a subconscious level, like embedded commands.
Absolutely. When they're used ethically, embedded commands can be a powerful tool for persuasion. But it's super important to use them while respecting the other person's freedom to choose. It's not about manipulation or forcing someone. It's about subtly guiding them towards a choice that's good for them, too.
It's more like planting a seed of suggestion rather than twisting their arm, right?
Right.
I think that's where the real power of these techniques lies, in understanding how to use those subtle influences to create situations where everyone wins.
Exactly. And that takes a deep understanding of human psychology, communication, and ethics. It's definitely not something to take lightly.
Definitely not. So we've covered visualization, body language, hypnotic language patterns, but what about those binaural beats and brainwave entrainment in the final track? That stuff still feels kind of like science fiction to me. Is there any real proof that those things work?
The research on brainwave entrainment is pretty new, but there are some promising findings. Certain frequencies of sound do seem to have an effect on brainwave activity, maybe even helping people relax, focus, or get creative. But it's important to know that the effects can be totally different for different people, and we need more research to really understand how it all works.
So it's not like a guaranteed fix, but it could be useful for some people.
Exactly. And it's smart to approach these techniques with an open mind, but also a healthy dose of skepticism, you know. Not everything that sounds cool or futuristic is actually backed up by solid science.
That's good advice. It's easy to get caught up in the hype of new technologies and techniques, but it's important to remember that we're still learning about them, and we don't know all the long-term effects yet.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations, to explore these ideas with a critical eye and to share information in a responsible way. It's about giving people the power to make informed choices about the tools and techniques they use to improve their lives.
Well said. And speaking of informed choices, have you ever tried any of these techniques yourself, like in your work or even just in your personal life?
I have. I've always been fascinated by the power of the subconscious.
Yeah.
And I've dabbled in a few different techniques over the years, from visualization to affirmations to NLP.
Mm.
What about you?
I've definitely played around with visualization and affirmations, mostly for like setting goals or creative stuff. But honestly, this whole deep dive has got me curious about some of these other techniques, especially the body language stuff. It really makes you realize how much we're communicating without even saying anything.
It's true. We're always sending and receiving signals through our body language, our tone of voice, even those tiny micro expressions. It's this whole other level of communication that we often miss.
And that's why it's so fascinating to explore. It's like unlocking a secret code to understanding how people behave and interact. And who knows, maybe even mastering the art of subtle influence. But of course, always being ethical about it.
Absolutely. Ethical awareness is super important, especially when we're dealing with the subconscious.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of different techniques today. But one thing that keeps popping up for me is this idea of belief and how we see ourselves. It seems like a lot of Dr. Giorgio's approach depends on believing in your own magnetism, even if you don't feel it at first. Do you think that's crucial for these techniques to actually work?
That's a great question. And it really gets at the heart of how the mind and body connect. Our beliefs have a huge impact on how our lives turn out. If we believe we can do something, we're more likely to take action to make it happen. But if we doubt ourselves, we often end up sabotaging our own success.
So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you think you're magnetic and attractive, you're more likely to act in ways that reflect that,
Right.
which then makes that belief even stronger. It's like a positive cycle.
Exactly. And that's why Dr. Giorgio puts so much emphasis on affirmations. By repeating those positive statements about yourself, you're basically training your subconscious mind to believe them. And over time, those beliefs can start to show up in how you act and what happens in your life.
It's like planting seeds in your mind and then helping them grow with positive self-talk until they bloom into a new reality.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And it highlights how transformative these techniques can be, even if we move beyond just trying to be more appealing to others. It's about using the power of your mind to create the life you want.
And that's a message that goes way beyond just attraction, right? It's about feeling empowered, believing in yourself, and realizing how much potential the human mind really has.
Couldn't agree more. It's exciting to think about how these principles can apply to all parts of our lives, from our relationships to our careers to even our creative pursuits.
Absolutely. And that's something we can explore more as we continue our deep dive. What do you say we switch gears and start talking about how these techniques could be used in other areas of life, beyond just romantic attraction?
I'm all for it. Let's dive in.
Okay, so we've gone through a lot with Dr. Giorgio's tracks, everything from like hypnotic inductions to that whole red hot energy thing. And I gotta say, some of this is really pushing my boundaries, but it's definitely making me think. What about you? What's stood out to you so far? What's been the most interesting or even surprising part?
It's really how Dr. Giorgio takes these classic hypnosis techniques
Hmm.
and combines them with very specific suggestions about sexuality, often with really vivid imagery. It's not just about relaxing and being open to suggestions. It's about using those states to change how someone sees their own attractiveness?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's like she's taken this whole framework of hypnosis and like fine-tuned it to this one specific goal of boosting sex appeal. It makes you wonder, is there something about how we think about sexuality that makes it, I don't know, particularly open to this kind of subconscious work?
That's a really interesting question. Sexuality is so tied up with like our identities, our emotions, even how we've been conditioned by society. It's not just a physical drive. It's this intricate mix of all these different factors. So it makes sense that techniques that work with the subconscious, which operates below our conscious awareness,
Hmm.
might be particularly effective in this area.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like we have all these layers of beliefs and associations about sexuality that we might not even realize are like more changeable than we think.
Exactly. And that's what makes Dr. DeGeorge's approach so interesting, whether or not you agree with it. She's essentially saying that we can rewrite those subconscious scripts to change the whole narrative around how sexually magnetic we are.
And she uses this really interesting combination of techniques to do it. We've got visualization, affirmations, body language cues, even hypnotic language patterns. It's like a multi-pronged attack on like rewiring how we see ourselves from the inside out.
It is. And while some of these techniques might seem uh, a little out there compared to others,
Yeah.
there's often this thread of real psychological insight running through them. Like, take that red hot energy visualization we were talking about earlier. Even though we can't literally shoot energy beams, just the act of vividly imagining ourselves as radiant and magnetic can actually boost our confidence and change how we carry ourselves.
Right. And that confidence can then like spill over into how we interact with others and
Mhm.
maybe even change how they see us. It's like that whole fake it till you make it thing. But in this case, it's more like visualize it till you embody it.
That's a perfect way to put it. And it connects to another technique Dr. DeGiorgio uses, pacing and leading with body language.
Hmm.
Remember, she talked about mirroring someone's body language subtly to build rapport and then gradually shifting your own to influence theirs.
Oh, yeah. The story she told about people almost falling off benches because of this was pretty crazy.
It was. But it really shows how powerful nonverbal communication can be. When we mirror someone, we're creating this sense of connection and trust without even realizing it. It's like we're speaking their body language, which makes them more open to being influenced by us.
It's like building a bridge of understanding through those subtle nonverbal cues. And once you've built that bridge, you can start to like gently guide them in a new direction. It's fascinating how much influence we can have without even saying a word.
It is. And this applies to way more than just seduction or romantic stuff. Think about really effective leaders or good negotiators. They often use mirroring and pacing to build rapport and make people feel like they're working together.
That's a great point. It's like these techniques, even though they're presented in the context of like attraction, can actually be used in all sorts of social situations. It's about understanding those basic human dynamics of connection and using that knowledge ethically to create a certain outcome.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the importance of intention, which Dr. DeGiorgio emphasizes throughout her tracks. It's not just about blindly following these techniques, it's about understanding the principles behind them and then applying them consciously and responsibly.
Right. It's about being mindful of how what we do affects other people and using our influence in a way that aligns with our values. And that's especially important when we're talking about things that work on the subconscious level, like those embedded commands.
Absolutely. Embedded commands, when they're used ethically, can be really powerful for persuasion. But you have to use them with respect for the other person's right to make your own choices. It's not about manipulating or coercing someone. It's about subtly guiding them towards something that's good for them too.
It's more about planting a seed of suggestion than like forcing their hand, right? And I think that's where the real power of these techniques comes in, understanding how to use those subtle influences to create situations where everyone benefits.
Exactly. And that takes a deep understanding of psychology, communication, and ethics. It's not something to be taken lightly.
Definitely not. So we've talked about visualization, body language, those hypnotic language patterns. But what about those binaural beats and brainwave entrainment in that last track? That stuff still feels a little like science fiction to me. Do we have any real proof that those things actually work?
The research on brainwave entrainment is still pretty new, but there are some interesting findings. Certain frequencies of sound do seem to affect brainwave activity, and they might even be able to induce states of relaxation, focus, or even creativity. But you have to keep in mind that the effects can be totally different for each person. We need more research to really get how it all works.
So it's not like a guaranteed solution, but it could be a helpful tool for some people.
Exactly. And it's always wise to approach these things with an open mind, but also a healthy dose of skepticism. Not everything that sounds cool or futuristic is actually backed by solid science.
That's a good point. It's easy to get caught up in all the hype around new technology and techniques, but we have to remember that we're still figuring out how they work and what the long-term effects might be.
Absolutely. And that's why these conversations are so important. We need to look at these ideas critically and share information responsibly. It's about empowering people to make informed decisions about the tools and techniques they use to make their lives better.
Well said. And speaking of making informed choices, I'm curious, have you ever actually tried any of these techniques yourself, like in your work or in your personal life?
Yeah, actually, I have. The power of the subconscious has always fascinated me. And I've experimented with different techniques over the years: visualization, affirmations, even NLP. What about you?
I've definitely played around with visualization and affirmations, mostly for things like setting goals or for my creative work. But to be honest, this deep dive has really made me curious about some of these other techniques, especially that body language stuff. It really highlights how much we're communicating without even realizing it?
It's true. We're constantly sending and receiving signals through our body language, our tone of voice, even our micro expressions. It's this whole other layer of communication that we often miss.
And that's what makes it so interesting to explore. It's like unlocking the secret code to understand how people behave and interact. And who knows, maybe even mastering that subtle art of influence. But of course, we always have to keep ethics in mind.
Absolutely. Being aware of ethical considerations is super important, especially when we're dealing with the subconscious mind.
Okay, so we've talked about a bunch of different techniques, but one thing that keeps coming back to me is this whole idea of belief and how we see ourselves. It seems like a lot of Dr. Giorgio's approach depends on believing you're magnetic, even if you don't feel that way at first. Do you think that's really necessary for these techniques to actually work?
That's a great question. And it really gets at the heart of the mind-body connection. Our beliefs have a huge influence on our reality. If we believe we can do something, we're more likely to take action that will make it happen. But if we doubt ourselves, we often get in our own way and end up sabotaging our own success.
So it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you believe you're magnetic and attractive, you're more likely to act in ways that show that, and that makes that belief even stronger, like a positive loop.
Exactly. And that's why Dr. Giorgio put so much emphasis on those affirmations. When you repeat those positive statements about yourself, you're basically programming your subconscious to believe them. And as time goes on, those beliefs can actually start to show up in your actions and what happens in your life.
It's like planting seeds in your mind and then nurturing them with positive self-talk until they blossom into this new reality.
That's such a beautiful way to put it. And it really shows how transformative these techniques can be, even if we don't just focus on the idea of being more appealing to others. It's about harnessing that power of your mind to create the life you want.
And that's a message that goes way beyond just attraction, doesn't it? It's about empowerment, believing in yourself, and realizing how much potential our minds really have.
Absolutely. It's exciting to think about how we can use these principles in all areas of our lives. Our relationships, our careers, even our creative pursuits.
Totally. And that's something we can definitely dive into more. Why don't we shift gears and start talking about how these techniques could be adapted and applied to other parts of life, beyond just romantic attraction?
I'm totally on board with that. Let's do it.
Okay, so we've spent a good chunk of time talking about how these techniques can really amp up sex appeal. But like we were just saying, it seems like the core ideas here, visualization, being intentional, even those sneaky embedded commands, they could apply to other parts of life too, right?
Oh, absolutely. And that's where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
It's like taking the core of these techniques and reframing them for different goals. Instead of just focusing on attracting a partner, we can tweak them to, say, boost our confidence at work, or even just to make a bigger impact when we're interacting with people socially.
Yeah, so it's kind of like taking the same tools and building a different kind of magnetism with them. Magnetism that pulls in like opportunities, collaborations, or even just a sense of personal fulfillment, you know?
Exactly. Imagine, instead of visualizing that red-hot sexual energy, you channel that same intensity into picturing yourself totally nailing a presentation at work, or like commanding attention in a meeting, or even just feeling completely comfortable and confident in a social situation.
That's a really cool way to shift things. It makes me think about those anchoring techniques we talked about. Instead of having a physical anchor to trigger that sexual magnetism, you could have one for like calm focus.
Right. Imagine having a specific gesture or a mental image that just instantly brings you back to that feeling of being centered and clear-headed. That would be so helpful in high-pressure situations, like before a big presentation or a tough conversation.
Yeah, it'd be like having a secret weapon against those pre-performance jitters. And what about those embedded commands? Could those be like adapted for stuff outside of romance?
Definitely. Instead of using commands like, you find me irresistibly attractive,
Yeah.
you could try subtly sending messages like, you trust my expertise, or you see me as a leader. It's all about understanding how language can shape how people see us
Yeah.
and like gently influence what they believe.
Wow, that's powerful stuff. But doesn't that bring up some ethical questions too? Where's the line between like persuasion and straight up manipulation?
That's the key question for sure. And it's something we need to be aware of no matter what the context is. Ethical communication is all about transparency, respect, and genuinely wanting things to work out well for everyone involved. It's not about using sneaky tricks to get what you want, even if it means stepping on someone else.
Yeah, totally. It's about using these techniques to empower ourselves and create positive connections with others, not to take advantage of them or be manipulative.
Exactly. And that all boils down to intention. It's about being aware of how our words and actions affect other people and making choices that match up with our values.
I love that. So we've got these tools for like boosting our magnetism, but it's up to us to use them wisely and ethically. It's like being handed a powerful spell book. You have the potential to do amazing things, but you also have a responsibility to use that power for good.
I love that analogy. That's such a good way to think about it. We all have the potential to be magnetic and influential, but we get to choose how we use that power.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of sex magnetism, what would you say is the most important takeaway for our listeners?
For me, it's realizing that the principles we've been talking about, visualization, intentionality, the power of belief, they aren't just limited to romantic attraction. We can use these principles in any area of our lives where we want to have a bigger impact, feel more confident, or just create a more fulfilling experience overall.
That's such a powerful message. It's not just about being more attractive to others. It's about becoming more magnetic in every sense, drawing in opportunities, connections, and experiences that truly resonate with who we are.
Yeah, exactly. It's about tapping into our own unique power and using it to create the lives we want.
Beautifully said. So whether you're looking to spark a romantic connection or just ignite your own inner spark, remember, the power to be magnetic starts within you. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, keep exploring.